a pregnant tech CEO, a billionaire husband, and a dinner invitation that would destroy an empire. Sarah Mitchell thought she knew her husband Eric Sterling, crypto billionaire, charming entrepreneur, father of her unborn twins. But when he casually announced he was bringing his business partner to their anniversary dinner, Sarah's world began to unravel. What she discovered wasn't just an affair, it was a twisted family conspiracy involving incest, money laundering for cartels, and a calculated plan to steal her children and her $100 million company. But Eric Sterling made one fatal mistake. He underestimated what a mother will do to protect her children. This is the true story of how one dinner party exposed a criminal empire and proved that sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most powerful victories. Sarah Mitchell stared at her laptop screen, her 6-month pregnant belly pressing against the edge of her standing desk in their $50 million Malibu mansion. The blockchain analytics software she developed for her tech startup was displaying something that made her blood run cold. Her husband, Eric Sterling, crypto billionaire and supposed love of her life, had been transferring massive amounts of Bitcoin to an account registered under the name Amber Hayes. Not business transactions, personal ones. $200,000 last month alone. Sarah's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the digital evidence. After 3 devastating miscarriages, this pregnancy with twins was supposed to be their fresh start. The baby kicks in her belly felt like tiny fists of betrayal as she uncovered transaction after transaction. "Baby, you're working too hard again." Eric's voice made her jump. He glided into their home office with that magnetic smile that had first captivated her at a tech conference 3 years ago. At 35, he still looked like the charming entrepreneur who'd swept her off her feet. But now Sarah saw something different in his gray eyes, something calculating. "Just reviewing the merger documents," Sarah lied smoothly, minimizing the screen. Her startup, CodeBridge Solutions, was on the verge of a $100 million acquisition. 3 years of 18-hour days building revolutionary blockchain security software had finally paid off. Eric moved behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders. "About that, I've been thinking, maybe you should slow down. Focus on the babies. I can handle the business side of things." The suggestion felt like ice water in her veins. "Eric, this is my company, my technology. I'm not stepping back now. I'm just saying, with your condition and all the stress," his fingers tightened slightly on her shoulders, "you've been acting paranoid lately, checking accounts, asking weird questions. It's not healthy." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Was he gaslighting her? Or was she actually becoming paranoid? The pregnancy hormones made everything feel amplified, uncertain. "Speaking of which," Eric continued, his tone brightening artificially, "I've got great news. I'm bringing a potential business partner to dinner tomorrow night, someone who could be crucial for our crypto mining expansion." "Tomorrow night." Sarah turned in her chair. "Eric, that's our anniversary dinner. We planned this weeks ago." "Even better. It'll show her how stable and committed we are. Her name's Amber Hayes. She's young, ambitious. Exactly the kind of fresh perspective we need." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Amber Hayes, the same name on those Bitcoin transactions. Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral. "How did you meet her?" "Through mutual connections. She's got this incredible social media presence. Really understands the influencer economy. Could be huge for our brand expansion." Sarah nodded slowly, her mind racing. Either this was the most convenient coincidence in history, or Eric was planning something truly twisted. "Of course, I'd love to meet her." Eric's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Perfect. I've already invited some of our investor friends too. Make it a real celebration of our success." As Eric left the office, Sarah immediately pulled up Instagram and searched for Amber Hayes. What she found made her stomach lurch. A 24-year-old blonde with nearly 1 million followers, posting luxury lifestyle content from locations Sarah recognized. Their Aspen cabin, the yacht Eric claimed he'd sold, the Paris hotel where they'd honeymooned. But it was the latest post that stopped her cold. A photo of an expensive diamond bracelet with the caption, "When your future is looking so bright, some secrets are worth keeping." Sarah screenshot everything, her tech entrepreneur instincts kicking in. If Eric was planning to humiliate her at their anniversary dinner, she'd be ready. She started compiling a digital dossier, tracking every connection between Eric and Amber. What she discovered over the next hour made her question everything she thought she knew about her husband. Amber hadn't just appeared in Eric's life recently. The blockchain evidence showed payments going back almost a year, but more disturbing were the property records Sarah accessed through her business connections. Eric had purchased a penthouse in downtown Los Angeles 8 months ago, in Amber's name. Sarah felt the babies kick harder, as if they could sense her distress. She placed both hands on her belly, drawing strength from the tiny lives inside her. Whatever Eric was planning, whatever twisted game he was playing, she wouldn't let him destroy her family or her company. Tomorrow night's dinner was clearly meant to be some kind of power play, but Sarah Mitchell hadn't built a $100 million tech company by backing down from fights. She'd built it by being smarter than everyone else in the room. Time to prove that once again. The next morning, Sarah found Eric's burner phone. She'd been looking for her laptop charger in Eric's car when her fingers closed around an unfamiliar device wedged between the seat cushions of his Tesla. The phone was locked, but Sarah had designed security systems for a living. She knew every backdoor, every vulnerability. Within 20 minutes, she was scrolling through a digital nightmare. Videos, dozens of them, Eric and Amber together, but not just intimate moments. Conversations, strategic planning sessions where they discuss Sarah like she was a business problem to be solved. "She's getting suspicious about the accounts," Eric's voice said from one video dated 3 weeks ago. "We need to accelerate the timeline." Amber's response made Sarah's blood freeze. "Poor little genius thinks she's so smart. Wait until she sees what we have planned for the anniversary dinner. She'll never recover from the humiliation." Sarah's hands shook as she continued scrolling. There were screenshots of her private text messages with her best friend Jessica, photos of Sarah taken without her knowledge, including unflattering shots of her pregnant body with cruel captions. Voice memos where Eric and Amber mocked her appearance, her intelligence, even her previous miscarriages. The fertility treatments made her so desperate. Eric's voice crackled through the phone's speaker. She'd do anything to keep this pregnancy. Makes her easy to manipulate. But the worst was yet to come. Sarah found a folder labeled Phase 2 containing documents that made her stomach lurch. Psychiatric evaluation forms with her forged signature, medical records falsely claiming she'd been treated for postpartum psychosis, legal documents prepared to have her declared mentally incompetent. They weren't just planning to humiliate her, they were planning to steal her company and her children. Sarah forced herself to think like the tech CEO she was, rather than the betrayed wife she felt like. She connected the burner phone to her laptop and began copying everything. Every video, every document, every piece of evidence of their conspiracy. Then she found the file that changed everything. DNA test results. Amber Hayes and Eric Sterling shared 25% of their genetic markers. They were half-siblings. Sarah ran to the bathroom and vomited until her stomach was empty. When she finally stopped retching, the horrible pieces fell into place. Eric's father had been notorious for his affairs before dying in a plane crash 15 years ago. Eric had been supporting Amber financially since she turned 18, but not as a sugar daddy, as a brother who'd groomed his half-sister into something far worse. The anniversary dinner wasn't just about humiliating Sarah, it was about Eric publicly claiming his sick relationship while destroying her reputation so thoroughly that no one would believe her if she tried to expose the truth. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Martinez, her best friend and investigative journalist. "Hey babe, running late to help with dinner prep. This Sterling family story I'm researching is getting wild. See you at 6. Sarah stared at the message. Jessica was researching the Sterling family. That couldn't be a coincidence. She called Jessica immediately. "What Sterling family story?" "Oh hey, you sound stressed. Don't worry about tonight. It'll be fine." "But this is weird timing. I've been investigating Eric's dad for a piece about Tech Dynasty corruption. Did you know Robert Sterling had like 6 different women pregnant at the same time back in the day?" Sarah's world tilted. 6 women? "Yeah, it's this whole rabbit hole. Apparently, he paid most of them to disappear, but there were rumors about kids he kept in contact with. Secret family members. Real sick stuff about maintaining control over them." The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't just Eric's twisted relationship with Amber. This was a family tradition of abuse and manipulation spanning generations. "Jessica, I need you to bring your research tonight. All of it." "Sarah, are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine. Just bring everything you have on the Sterling family. Trust me." After hanging up, Sarah sat in her home office, surrounded by evidence of her husband's betrayal, and made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. She'd turn Eric's own game against him. But first, she needed to understand exactly who would be at tonight's dinner. Sarah pulled up the guest list Eric had sent to their household staff. The crypto investors who could make or break her merger, social media influencers with millions of followers, Eric's business partners who enabled his lifestyle, and at the bottom of the list, a name that made Sarah's heart stop Margaret Sterling. Eric's mother, who Sarah had met exactly twice in 3 years of marriage. The woman Eric claimed was too busy with her own life to be involved with theirs. Maggie Sterling was coming to the anniversary dinner, the woman who'd raised Eric, who'd known about his father's twisted legacy, was going to witness whatever Eric had planned for tonight. Either she was coming to stop it, or she was coming to participate in it. Sarah had 6 hours to figure out which one and prepare for both possibilities. The babies kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah placed her hands on her belly. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Mommy's going to protect you from all of this." She just hoped she was strong enough to keep that promise. At 5:30 that evening, Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, applying concealer to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She'd chosen a black maternity dress that Eric had once said made her look sophisticated but approachable. Tonight, she needed every advantage. The catering staff bustled around downstairs, preparing for what Eric had billed as an intimate dinner for 12. Sarah's reflection showed a woman who looked calm and composed, but inside, her thoughts raced through every possible scenario for the evening ahead. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Sterling. This is Margaret Sterling. I'll be arriving early. We need to talk privately. Do not tell Eric." Sarah stared at the message. Maggie Sterling wanted to meet before the dinner. This wasn't part of Eric's plan. Sarah quickly typed back, "I'll be in the garden, side entrance." 20 minutes later, Sarah watched a silver Mercedes pull into their circular driveway. Margaret Sterling emerged like something from another era, impeccably dressed in a navy Chanel suit, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. At 65, she moved with the confidence of a woman who'd spent decades commanding boardrooms and social events. "Sarah," Maggie's voice was crisp, professional. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Mrs. Sterling, I have to say I'm surprised you're here. Eric said you were too busy to—" "My son says many things that aren't true." Maggie's pale blue eyes studied Sarah intently. "How much do you know about what Eric has planned for tonight?" Sarah felt like she was walking through a minefield. "I know he's bringing someone named Amber Hayes, someone he claims is a business partner." Amber Hayes is Robert Sterling's daughter, Eric's half-sister. She's 24 years old, and Eric has been financially supporting her since she was 18. Maggie's words were delivered with surgical precision. "What Eric doesn't know is that I've been monitoring his activities for the past 2 years. The garden seemed to spin around Sarah. "You've been watching him. My husband Robert was a predator who used his wealth and power to abuse young women. I was too weak to stop him then. But I won't let Eric continue the cycle." Maggie reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "6 months ago, I hired a private investigation firm. This contains everything." Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Financial records showing Eric's systematic grooming of Amber. Psychiatric evaluations proving Eric was a sociopathic manipulator. Most damning of all, videos that Eric had sent to other wealthy men, essentially offering to share Amber for the right price. "This is—" Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. "This is who my son really is. A man who inherited his father's worst traits and amplified them." Maggie's voice carried decades of regret. "What he's planning tonight is designed to destroy you completely. Public humiliation followed by legal maneuvers to have you declared mentally incompetent. He wants your company, your children, and your silence." Sarah felt the babies kick urgently, as if they could sense the danger. "Why are you telling me this? Why help me for the first time?" Maggie's composure cracked slightly. "Because I have 2 grandchildren in your belly who deserve better than to be raised by monsters, and because I've spent 15 years atoning for my failures with Robert, and I won't fail again." "What do you want me to do?" "Tonight, Eric will reveal his relationship with Amber publicly. He'll present it as a modern love story, with you as the hysterical ex-wife. The investors he's invited have already been briefed to expect you to have a breakdown." Maggie pulled out a small recording device. "But Eric doesn't know that Amber has been working with federal investigators for the past 3 months. Sarah's world tilted again. "What? The FBI approached Amber after discovering Eric's cryptocurrency transactions were being used to launder money for several criminal organizations. She agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity and protection from Eric's increasingly violent threats." The pieces were clicking into place, but Sarah still felt lost. "So tonight is a sting operation, but Eric will try to destroy you before the federal agents move in. You need to be prepared for him to become dangerous when he realizes he's been caught." As if summoned by their conversation, Eric's voice carried across the garden. "Sarah, where are you? Our guests are starting to arrive." Maggie quickly handed Sarah a small panic button disguised as a jewelry pin. "If Eric becomes violent, press this. Federal agents are positioned around the property. How long have you been planning this?" 2 years. Ever since I realized Eric was exactly like his father." Maggie's eyes hardened. "The Sterling family's reign of abuse ends tonight, one way or another." Sarah pinned the device to her dress as Eric appeared on the garden path. His smile faltered when he saw his mother. "Mother, you're early. And you're talking to Sarah alone because—" "I was admiring her garden and offering my congratulations on the pregnancy," Maggie replied smoothly. Twins are such a blessing. Eric's eyes narrowed slightly, but his charming mask slipped back into place. Of course. Well, our investors are here, and Amber just arrived. Shall we go inside? As they walked toward the house, Sarah caught Maggie's eye. The older woman gave an almost imperceptible nod. Whatever was about to happen, Sarah wouldn't face it alone. But first, she had to survive dinner with her sociopathic husband, his half-sister Mistress, and a room full of people who thought they were about to witness her public destruction. The real question was whether Sarah was strong enough to play her part in bringing down Eric's empire, or if the stress would cost her everything she was fighting to protect. The dining room of the Sterling mansion gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the long mahogany table set for 12 with their finest china and silverware. Sarah took her assigned seat. Eric had placed her at the far end of the table, literally distancing her from the conversation that mattered. Amber Hayes entered like she was walking a red carpet, blonde, stunning, and wearing a red dress that cost more than most people's cars. She commanded every eye in the room. The investors, 3 men and 2 women who controlled billions in venture capital, watched her with interest. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Amber Hayes, Eric announced, his hand possessively on Amber's lower back. She's been instrumental in developing our new social media marketing strategies. Sarah watched the performance with detached fascination. Amber played her part perfectly, charming, intelligent, slightly mysterious. She fielded questions about cryptocurrency trends and influencer marketing with surprising sophistication. Amber has this incredible understanding of how to build authentic connections with younger demographics. Eric continued. She's been helping us reach markets we never could have accessed otherwise. David Chen, Eric's business partner, raised his wine glass. Well, here's to expanding horizons and new partnerships. The toast felt like a funeral dirge to Sarah. She sipped her sparkling water and caught Maggie's eye across the table. Eric's mother sat ramrod straight, playing the role of proud matriarch while internally orchestrating her son's downfall. Sarah, you're awfully quiet tonight, commented Linda Morrison, one of the investors who could make or break Sarah's merger. How are you feeling about all these exciting developments? The question was loaded. Sarah realized the investors had been primed to watch for signs of her supposed mental instability. I'm feeling blessed, Sarah replied carefully. Pregnant with twins, successful company acquisition in progress. What more could I ask for? Sarah's been under a lot of stress lately, Eric said with false concern. The pregnancy hormones, the business pressure. I've been worried about her. Amber placed her hand over Eric's with theatrical sympathy. Pregnancy can be so overwhelming. I've been trying to encourage Eric to make sure Sarah has all the support she needs. The gaslighting was masterful. To everyone else, Eric and Amber looked like caring friends worried about Sarah's well-being, but Sarah could see the predatory satisfaction in their eyes. Actually, Sarah said, setting down her water glass, I've been feeling very clear-headed lately. Almost like fog has lifted. I'm seeing things I missed before. Eric's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sometimes clarity can feel overwhelming when you're in a delicate state. What kind of things are you seeing more clearly? Asked Jessica Martinez. Sarah's best friend had arrived fashionably late, carrying a leather portfolio that Sarah knew contained explosive information about the Sterling family history. Patterns, Sarah replied. Financial patterns, behavioral patterns. You know how blockchain technology reveals connections that weren't visible before life can be similar. Amber shifted uncomfortably in her seat. For someone supposedly confident in her position, she looked increasingly nervous as the evening progressed. Speaking of patterns, Jessica said, opening her portfolio. "I've been researching some fascinating family histories for a series I'm writing. The Sterling family has such an interesting background." Maggie's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught the slight nod of approval. The trap was being set. "The Sterling men seem to have a pattern of complex relationship arrangements," Jessica continued conversationally. "Take Robert Sterling, Eric's father. Did you know he maintained financial relationships with at least 6 different women simultaneously?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eric's knuckles went white as he gripped his wine glass. "I'm not sure this is appropriate dinner conversation," David Chen interjected. "Oh, but it's fascinating from a sociological perspective." Jessica pressed on. "These powerful men who feel entitled to reshape family structures to suit their desires, Robert Sterling, for instance, apparently maintained contact with several of his illegitimate children well into their adulthood." Amber had gone completely pale. Sarah realized the young woman was terrified that Jessica had uncovered the truth about her relationship with Eric. "Some family histories are better left in the past," Maggie said quietly. Her words seemed directed at Eric more than Jessica. "But history has a way of repeating itself," Sarah found herself saying. "Unless someone breaks the cycle." Eric's mask was beginning to slip. The charming businessman was being replaced by something colder, more dangerous. "Sarah, you're clearly having one of your episodes. Maybe you should rest." "Episodes?" Linda Morrison looked concerned. "What kind of episodes?" "Sarah's been experiencing some paranoid delusions," Eric explained with false sadness. "Imagining conspiracies, seeing threats that aren't there. The doctors think it might be pregnancy-related psychosis." The room erupted in murmured concern. Sarah felt the trap closing around her exactly as Eric had planned, but instead of panic, she felt a strange calm descend. "What doctors?" she asked clearly. "I'd love to hear about these medical consultations I apparently had without my knowledge." Eric's eyes flashed with anger. "Dr. Phillips at Westside Medical. You don't remember because you were having a dissociative episode." "That's interesting," Sarah replied, "because Dr. Phillips doesn't exist. There is no Westside Medical in Los Angeles." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see the investors exchanging glances, realizing they were witnessing something far more complex than an unstable pregnant woman. "Of course, if you wanted to fabricate medical records to support an incompetency hearing," Sarah continued, "you'd need to create fictional doctors and facilities." Eric stood up so violently his chair toppled backward. "That's enough. You're embarrassing yourself." Am I finally seeing clearly enough to connect the dots?" Sarah's voice carried across the room with surprising strength. "Tell me, Eric, when exactly were you planning to reveal that Amber is your half-sister?" The explosion of shocked voices around the table was immediate and chaotic, but Sarah only had eyes for Eric's face as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. The dinner theater was reaching its climax, but the real performance was just beginning. The dining room erupted into chaos as Sarah's words sank in. Wine glasses hit the table with sharp clinks, chairs scraped against marble floors, and shocked voices overlapped in a cacophony of disbelief. "Half-sister," Linda Morrison's voice cut through the noise. "What are you talking about?" Eric's face had transformed from charming host to something much darker. "Sarah is having a complete psychotic break. She's been making increasingly wild accusations. DNA doesn't lie." Jessica Martinez interrupted, pulling documents from her portfolio. 25% genetic match between Eric Sterling and Amber Hayes. Both children of Robert Sterling. Amber shot to her feet, her red dress like a splash of blood against the white dining room. "This is insane! I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do." The voice came from the dining room entrance, where two people in dark suits had appeared. FBI, nobody leaves this room. Sarah's heart hammered as she realized Maggie's plan was accelerating faster than expected. The federal agents moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves at both exits. "What the hell is this?" David Chen demanded. Agent Rebecca Torres, a stern woman in her 40s, held up her badge. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Hayes, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." Eric's transformation was complete. The charming billionaire mask had been replaced by pure rage. "You have no authority here. This is harassment. We have 18 months of recorded conversations, financial records, and cooperation from Ms. Hayes," Agent Torres replied calmly. "Your cryptocurrency operation has been laundering money for 3 different criminal organizations." Sarah watched in fascination as Amber's terrified expression shifted to something else. Relief. "I told you this would happen," Amber said to Eric, her voice shaking. "I told you they were watching us." "Shut up," Eric snarled. "Don't say another word." "Why? So you can throw me away like you threatened to when I said I wanted out." Amber's composure finally cracked completely. "You want to know about psychotic breaks? Try being groomed by your own brother from the time you were 18 years old." The investors sat frozen, realizing they were witnessing not just business fraud, but a family nightmare spanning decades. "Ms. Hayes has been cooperating with federal investigators for 3 months, Agent Torres explained. "She approached us after Mr. Sterling threatened her life when she tried to end their relationship." Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. Amber wasn't just Eric's victim. She was also trying to escape. The young woman she'd hated was actually another survivor of Eric's manipulation. The anniversary dinner was supposed to be his grand finale. Amber continued, tears streaming down her face. "He was going to have me announce our engagement while destroying Sarah's reputation so completely that no one would believe her if she tried to expose us." Eric lunged toward Amber with a roar of rage, but Agent Torres intercepted him smoothly. "Eric Sterling, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." "This is all lies," Eric screamed as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Sarah planned this. She's the one laundering money through her tech company." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. Even now, Eric was trying to destroy her by redirecting federal attention to her business. "That's an interesting theory," Agent Torres said. "Except we've been monitoring your accounts, not hers. Your wife's company is completely clean." As Eric was led away, still screaming threats and accusations, Sarah suddenly felt the world tilting dangerously. The stress, the revelation, the federal agents, it was too much. "Sarah." Jessica's voice seemed to come from very far away as Sarah gripped the edge of the table. Pain shot through her abdomen like lightning. "The babies." Something was wrong with the baby. Get an ambulance," Maggie's voice commanded with authority that brooked no argument. "Now." Sarah slumped in her chair as contractions began. 6 weeks too early. Through the haze of pain and panic, she could hear Linda Morrison on her phone. "Cancel the Sterling merger, immediately. I don't care what the contracts say." "The babies," Sarah gasped to Jessica, who was kneeling beside her chair. "It's too early." "They're going to be fine," Jessica said firmly. "You're going to be fine. You're the strongest person I know." As paramedics rushed into the dining room, Sarah caught sight of Maggie Sterling standing near the windows. Eric's mother was watching the chaos with an expression of profound sadness and relief. "Mrs. Sterling," Sarah called weakly. Maggie approached and took Sarah's hand. "The cycle ends tonight," she said quietly. Those babies will never know the poison that infected this family. Sarah squeezed Maggie's hand as another contraction hit. Promise me, if something happens to me, don't let them grow up thinking their father was a good man. Nothing is going to happen to you, Maggie replied with fierce certainty. You're going to raise those children to be everything Eric never was, and I'm going to help you. As the paramedics lifted Sarah onto a stretcher, she could see Amber Hayes sitting alone at the abandoned dinner table, no longer playing a role, just a young woman who'd survived something terrible. Take care of her, too, Sarah whispered to Maggie. She's a victim in this. The last thing Sarah saw before the ambulance doors closed was their mansion growing smaller in the distance. No longer a prison, but just a building where a family's twisted legacy had finally come to an end. But first, she had to fight for the lives of her children. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Sarah lay connected to monitors that beeped steadily, tracking her heartbeat and the baby's vital signs. At 26 weeks, the twins were viable, but would face a difficult fight if born now. Contractions are slowing, Doctor, Sarah Kim announced, checking the monitors. The medication is working. We're going to try to keep these babies cooking for at least another 8 weeks. Jessica sat in the bedside chair, laptop balanced on her knees as she fielded calls from reporters wanting the inside story on Eric Sterling's arrest. No comment, she repeated for the 20th time. My priority is my friend's health. Maggie Sterling entered carrying coffee and looking like she hadn't slept in 36 hours. Any changes? Babies are stable, Sarah replied, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. But the doctors want to keep me on bed rest for the duration of the pregnancy. Good. You'll stay at my house when you're discharged. The mansion is a crime scene now anyway. Sarah studied Eric's mother with new eyes. Why are you doing this, really? Maggie sat heavily in the second chair, suddenly looking every one of her 65 years. Because I failed Eric completely. I saw the warning signs when he was young, the cruelty to animals, the manipulation of other children, the sense of entitlement that went beyond normal privilege, but I told myself it was just boyish behavior that he'd outgrow. You couldn't have known how far it would go. I knew exactly how far it could go. I lived with his father for 20 years. Maggie's voice carried decades of regret. Robert didn't just have affairs. He systematically groomed and controlled young women, many of them barely legal. I stayed because I thought I could contain the damage, manage the family reputation. Sarah's heart monitor beeping faster as anger spiked through her. You enabled it. Yes, I did. And Eric learned from watching me that powerful men's crimes should be covered up rather than stopped. Maggie met Sarah's eyes directly. I won't make that mistake with my grandchildren. They deserve better. A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Torres entered with a tablet and a grim expression. Mrs. Sterling, I need to update you on the investigation. How bad is it? Sarah asked. Bad. Eric's cryptocurrency operation was more extensive than we initially realized. He was laundering approximately $50 million annually for various criminal enterprises, money from human trafficking, drug distribution, weapons sales. Sarah felt nauseous. I had no idea. My company had completely separate accounts. We know your financial records are clean, but Eric was planning to frame you as the mastermind. We found detailed plans on his devices for transferring criminal proceeds through your blockchain security software without your knowledge. Could he have done it? If he'd had another 6 months, probably. Your technology is sophisticated enough to mask the transactions. And as your husband, he had access to your security protocols. Jessica looked up from her laptop. The media is calling it the biggest tech industry fraud scandal since Theranos. There's more, Agent Torres continued. Amber Hayes has provided evidence of Eric's threats against you and the babies. He'd prepared fake medical records claiming you were mentally incompetent, and he'd already retained a lawyer to pursue emergency custody of the children after birth. Sarah's hands instinctively moved to her belly. He was going to take my babies. His plan was comprehensive. Public humiliation at the dinner party, followed by emergency psychiatric commitment based on fabricated evidence. While you were institutionalized, he'd gain control of your company assets and parental rights. Maggie's face had gone ashen. Robert tried something similar with Eric's birth mother, had her committed to a private facility for 6 months while he established sole custody. The pattern repeats, Sarah whispered. Not anymore, Agent Torres said firmly. Eric is facing federal charges that carry a minimum of 20 years in prison. The state of California is also pursuing charges related to the fake medical records and planned kidnapping. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling exhaustion wash over her. What about Amber? Witness protection. She's testified against not just Eric, but the entire criminal network he was working with. Her cooperation has been invaluable. I want to talk to her. Before she disappears into witness protection, Agent Torres frowned. That's highly irregular. She's 24 years old and has been manipulated by my husband since she was 18. She deserves to hear from someone that it wasn't her fault. After some negotiation, Agent Torres agreed to arrange a brief, supervised conversation. An hour later, Amber Hayes entered the hospital room looking younger and more fragile than she had at the dinner party. I'm sorry, Amber said immediately, tears already flowing. I'm so sorry for everything. You don't need to apologize to me, Sarah replied gently. You were a victim too. But I participated. I helped him plan to hurt you and take your children. Under duress, after years of grooming and manipulation, Sarah's voice was firm. That's not consent. Amber, that's coercion. Amber broke down completely, sobbing with the raw grief of someone who'd finally realized the full extent of their trauma. Maggie moved to embrace the young woman, and Sarah saw something healing in the older woman's face. You saved us all by cooperating with the FBI, Sarah continued. You stopped Eric from hurting anyone else. I was so scared. He said if I ever tried to leave, he'd destroy me completely. Make it look like I was the criminal mastermind and he was just my victim. That's exactly what he was planning to do to me, Sarah realized. Projection, make his victims look like the perpetrators. It's a classic abuser tactic, Maggie added. Robert did the same thing to every woman he discarded. As Amber was led away to begin her new life in witness protection, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not just physical healing, but emotional clarity. Eric's reign of terror was over, but the real work was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat propped up in bed at Maggie's Pasadena estate, laptop balanced carefully on her knees as she conducted video calls with her CodeBridge Solutions team. The merger had been delayed but not canceled. The investors were actually more interested now that Sarah had been vindicated as an ethical leader. The blockchain security protocols are testing even better than projected, her CTO Marcus reported via video call. Removing Eric's access actually improved our system integrity. Good. What's our timeline for the acquisition completion? 8 weeks, assuming no complications. The buyers are impressed by how you handled the crisis. Shows real leadership under pressure. After ending the call, Sarah looked out at Maggie's garden where the older woman was reading to a group of children from the local domestic violence shelter. It had become a weekly tradition, part of Maggie's own healing process. How are the babies today? Jessica asked, entering with a tray of tea and the latest news coverage. Active, Dr. Kim says they're developing perfectly, despite the early stress. Sarah accepted the tea gratefully. What's the media saying now? Eric's pleading not guilty to all charges, but his legal team is jumping ship faster than the Titanic. Turns out nobody wants to represent someone who was laundering money for cartels while planning to steal his own children. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Amber. Agent Torres said I could send you this. Thank you for believing me. You saved my life." "She's doing well in the program," Jessica noted, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "Torres says she's starting college classes online. Psychology major." "Good for her." Sarah meant it. She has a chance to build a real life now. Maggie entered from the garden, carrying a tablet with a satisfied expression. "I wanted to show you something." The tablet displayed a press release from the Sterling Family Foundation, new leadership and mission focus on trauma recovery and survivor support. "I'm dissolving Eric's board positions and redirecting all foundation resources toward helping abuse survivors," Maggie explained. "Starting with funding a specialized program for victims of family-based financial crimes." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Maggie, that's incredible. It's what should have been done decades ago. Robert's money was built on exploitation. Time to use it for healing instead." A sharp pain in Sarah's abdomen interrupted the moment. Not a contraction, but something different. Intense pressure and a sudden gush of fluid. "My water just broke," Sarah announced with surprising calm. The next few hours blurred together in a rush of medical activity. At 32 weeks, the twins were still early, but much safer than they would have been a month ago. Dr. Kim and her team worked with efficient precision while Sarah focused on breathing through contractions. "I can see the first baby's head," Dr. Kim announced. "One more big push. Sarah." With Jessica holding one hand and Maggie holding the other, Sarah brought her daughter into the world. The tiny girl emerged with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room with relief and joy. "She's beautiful," Maggie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect." 20 minutes later, Sarah's son followed his sister into the world, smaller but equally determined to make his presence known. 5 pounds 2 ounces and 4 pounds 11 ounces. Dr. Kim announced. "They'll need some time in the NICU, but they're both breathing on their own and showing excellent vital signs." As the medical team cleaned and assessed the babies, Sarah felt a profound peace settle over her. These children would never know their father's poison. They would grow up surrounded by love, truth, and the strength of women who'd refused to let evil win. "What are you going to name them?" Jessica asked softly. Sarah looked at the tiny faces of her children, then at Maggie, who had become family in the truest sense. "Grace Margaret Sterling for the girl, and James Robert Sterling for the boy." Maggie's eyes widened. "Sarah, you don't need to jar. James Robert after the grandfather he never knew, not the one who would have destroyed him," Sarah clarified. "These children deserve to reclaim their family name and make it mean something good." When the babies were stable enough, a nurse brought Grace to Sarah's arms. The tiny girl opened dark eyes that seemed to look directly at her mother with ancient wisdom. "Hello, beautiful," Sarah whispered. "You're safe now. You're loved. And you're going to change the world." Through the NICU window, Sarah could see photographers from various news outlets trying to get pictures. The story of her triumph over Eric had captured public imagination, the pregnant tech CEO who'd exposed her billionaire husband's criminal empire. "They want the fairy tale ending," Jessica observed. "This isn't a fairy tale," Sarah replied, cradling her daughter. "It's better. It's real." As if summoned by her words, Agent Torres appeared in the doorway with final legal documents. Eric's plea bargain was rejected. He's going to trial for the full charges. minimum 25 years if convicted. And the maximum, life without parole. The money laundering charges alone carry that possibility. Sarah nodded, feeling closure beginning to take shape. Good. He can't hurt anyone else. Looking around the hospital room at Jessica documenting everything for her investigative series, Maggie planning the foundation's expansion, and her newborn children sleeping peacefully, Sarah realized something profound had happened. She hadn't just survived Eric's betrayal, she'd transformed it into something that would protect countless other victims. The real victory wasn't revenge. It was building something better from the ashes of what he'd tried to destroy. 6 months later, Sarah sat in the federal courthouse holding 18-month-old Grace while James napped in his stroller beside her. The twins had thrived despite their early arrival, and Sarah had returned to running Codebridge Solutions with renewed purpose. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams, the bailiff announced. The courtroom was packed with reporters, federal agents, and survivors who'd followed Eric's case as a symbol of justice. Eric entered in an orange jumpsuit, looking pale and diminished after 6 months in federal custody. Mr. Sterling, how do you plead to the charges of conspiracy to commit money laundering in the first degree? Not guilty, Your Honor. Eric's voice lacked the magnetic confidence that had once commanded boardrooms. The prosecution laid out their case with devastating precision. Agent Torres testified about the 18-month investigation that uncovered Eric's criminal network. Financial experts explained how Eric had laundered over $100 million for various criminal enterprises. But it was Amber Hayes' testimony that truly destroyed Eric's defense. Now 25 and using her real name, Amanda Sterling, she took the stand with quiet dignity. Her hair was shorter, her makeup minimal, but she radiated strength that hadn't been present during her life with Eric. Can you describe the nature of your relationship with the defendant, prosecutor Maria Gonzalez asked. Eric Sterling is my half-brother. Our father had an affair with my mother in 1999. Eric has been financially supporting me since I turned 18, but that support came with conditions. What kind of conditions? Amanda's voice remained steady. Sexual compliance, public appearances as his girlfriend, participation in criminal activities. When I tried to end the relationship, he threatened to have me killed. Eric's public defender attempted to discredit Amanda during cross-examination. Isn't it true that you willingly participated in these alleged criminal activities for financial gain? I participated under duress after years of grooming that began when I was a minor. Amanda replied firmly, That's not willing participation. That's survival. Sarah found herself admiring the young woman's courage. Amanda had transformed from Eric's victim into his destroyer with grace and honesty. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They presented Eric's fake medical records designed to have Sarah committed. They showed cryptocurrency wallets used to launder money for human traffickers. They played recordings where Eric discussed disposing of problems in ways that clearly implied violence. When Eric took the stand, his performance was narcissistic self-destruction. I was trying to protect my family's reputation, he claimed. My father made mistakes, but that doesn't make me a criminal. You consider planning to have your pregnant wife committed as protecting your family? Prosecutor Gonzalez asked. Sarah was clearly having mental health issues. I was trying to get her help. By forging medical records and bribing doctors who don't exist, Eric's composure cracked. She was threatening to destroy everything my family built. Someone had to stop her. Stop her from what running her own company. Carrying your children. Stop her from being weak. Eric exploded. The Sterling family doesn't tolerate weakness. Real power requires real strength. The outburst sealed his fate. Even his own lawyer looked horrified. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sarah felt Grace squeeze her finger as the verdict was read. Around them, survivors wept with relief. The defendant will be sentenced in 30 days, Judge Williams announced. Given the severity of these crimes, the court will consider the maximum penalty. As Eric was led away in shackles, he looked directly at Sarah for the first time since the trial began. She expected hatred in his eyes. Instead, she saw confusion, as if he genuinely couldn't understand how his perfect plan had failed. Outside the courthouse, Sarah had one statement prepared. Today's verdict sends a message that wealth cannot shield predators from justice. But more importantly, it proves that survivors have voices that can't be silenced. My children will grow up knowing their father's crimes have consequences. And that gives me hope. That evening, Sarah sat in her Pasadena garden with Maggie while the twins played nearby. CodeBridge Solutions had completed its acquisition for $200 million, making Sarah one of the youngest female billionaires in tech. Any regrets? Maggie asked. Sarah considered seriously. I regret that it took so long to see who Eric really was. I regret that Amber suffered for years before escaping. But I don't regret fighting back. And I don't regret that my children will never wonder whether their mother was strong enough to protect them. As the sun set, Sarah watched her children discover flowers while their grandmother read them stories. It wasn't the life she'd planned when she married Eric Sterling, but it was infinitely better. Tomorrow, Eric would be sentenced. Sarah would witness justice, not for revenge, but for closure and hope that his punishment might prevent other predators from believing they were above the law. The Sterling family legacy would end with Eric, but the story Sarah was writing with her children was just beginning. The sentencing hearing drew an even larger crowd than the trial. Victims of financial crimes, domestic violence survivors, and tech industry leaders filled every seat in Judge Williams' courtroom. Sarah arrived early, carrying Grace while James rode in his stroller, pushed by Maggie. Mrs. Sterling, any final thoughts before sentencing? A reporter called out. Justice isn't about revenge, Sarah replied calmly. It's about protection. Today's sentence will determine how many future victims Eric Sterling can never hurt. Inside the courtroom, Eric looked haggard after 8 months in federal custody. His expensive suits had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His confidence had evaporated completely. Before I impose sentence, Judge Williams announced, I will hear victim impact statements. Amanda Sterling took the podium first. Now using her birth name and enrolled in graduate school psychology, she spoke with quiet authority. Eric Sterling stole 6 years of my life through manipulation and abuse. He convinced me I was worthless without his support. Today, I want him to know that I not only survived his cruelty, I used it to become stronger than he ever was. Sarah was next. She approached the podium carrying Grace, who had become a symbol of hope for many who'd followed the case. Eric Sterling didn't just betray me as a husband. He tried to steal my children, destroy my company, and erase my identity. He failed because he underestimated the power of truth and the determination of a mother protecting her children. My daughter and son will grow up knowing that justice exists and no one is too powerful to face consequences. Other victims came forward. Women Eric's father had abused. Business partners Eric had defrauded. The pattern of Sterling family abuse stretched back generations. But it would end today. Judge Williams took 30 minutes to review the guidelines before addressing the court. Mr. Sterling, you have been convicted of crimes that affected countless victims. Your financial crimes funded human trafficking and weapons trafficking. Your personal crimes included systematic abuse and planned kidnapping. Most disturbing is your complete lack of remorse. She paused, letting her words settle. This court sentences you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, all Sterling family assets obtained through criminal activity, approximately $300 million, will be forfeited to a victim compensation fund. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears of relief as Grace babbled happily, oblivious to the historic moment. Outside the courthouse, Sarah held a press conference. Today's sentence represents society's commitment to protecting the vulnerable from predators who believe wealth makes them untouchable. To other survivors watching this, please know that your voice matters, your truth has power, and there are people who will stand with you when you're ready to fight back. 6 months later, Sarah testified before Congress about financial crimes in the tech industry. Her expertise led to the Sterling Act, landmark legislation creating new protections for victims of financial crimes committed by family members. The Sterling Family Foundation, now run by Maggie with Amanda's input, had become one of the nation's leading resources for victims of sophisticated abuse, helping over 3,000 people escape similar situations. That evening, Sarah returned home where the twins were celebrating their second birthday. Grace toddled around chasing butterflies while James examined flowers with scientific intensity. Amanda had driven down from Berkeley, where she was completing her PhD in trauma psychology. "Any word from the Stanford interview?" Sarah asked Amanda. "They offered me the position. I'll be running their new research program on family-based financial abuse." Amanda's smile was radiant. "6 years ago, I thought my life was over. Now I'm going to spend my career helping other survivors rebuild theirs." As the sun set over their chosen family gathering, Sarah reflected on the journey. Eric's betrayal had nearly destroyed her, but it had also revealed strengths she hadn't known she possessed and connected her with people who'd become her truest family. Grace climbed into Sarah's lap, babbling about her day. James followed, more cautious but equally affectionate. Looking at her children, Sarah saw infinite possibility unmarked by their father's poison. They would grow up knowing their mother had faced evil and won, that their grandmother had turned trauma into healing for thousands, and that their Aunt Amanda had transformed survival into service. The Sterling name would forever be associated with Eric's crimes, but Sarah's children would create their own legacy, one built on truth, justice, and the belief that survivors can become protectors. The fairy tale was over. Real life, with all its complexity and beauty, was just beginning. 5 years after Eric's sentencing, Sarah stood at the podium of the Forbes Women's Summit, addressing an audience of entrepreneurs and investors. At 33, she'd built CodeBridge Solutions into a $10 billion empire while raising her twins and advocating for abuse survivors worldwide. "The question I'm asked most often," Sarah began, "is whether I regret marrying Eric Sterling. People want the narrative of regret, but here's the truth without that experience. I would never have found my real strength, my true family, or my life's purpose." Grace and James, now 7 years old, sat in the front row with Maggie, who at 70 had become one of the nation's most respected advocates for abuse survivors. "Eric Sterling tried to erase me from my own life," Sarah continued. "He nearly succeeded, but his greatest failure was underestimating what a mother will do to protect her children, and what truth will do when it finally has a voice." The audience gave her a standing ovation, but Sarah's attention was on her children. James raised his small hand and approached the microphone. "Excuse me," his clear voice carried across the room. "I wanted to say something about my mom." The room quieted as the 7-year-old looked directly at Sarah. "Some kids have dads who teach them stuff. My dad is in prison because he hurt people, but my mom taught me that sometimes the best thing a parent can do is protect their kids from the other parent. Not all families look the same, but love is love." There wasn't a dry eye in the room as James walked back to his seat. Grace stood and clapped for her brother, beaming with pride. Later that evening, Sarah tucked the twins into bed while Maggie cleaned up from their celebration dinner. Amanda had joined them via video call from Geneva, where she was presenting research to the United Nations. "Mom," Grace said as Sarah pulled up her covers, "why did Dad try to hurt you?" Sarah had been preparing for this question since they were old enough to understand their father wasn't just absent, he was imprisoned for crimes against their family. "Some people get sick in their hearts and minds," Sarah explained gently. "They start believing that other people aren't real, that only their wants matter. Dad got that kind of sick, and instead of getting help, he chose to hurt people." "But you stopped him," James added with satisfaction. "We all stopped him together. That's how it works when someone tries to hurt a family. Other people step in to help." After the children fell asleep, Sarah joined Maggie on the back porch where they'd shared countless conversations. The older woman had become the mother Sarah had lost young and the partner in healing that made their new life possible. "Any regrets?" Maggie asked, echoing her question from years earlier. "None," Sarah replied immediately. "Well, maybe one. I wish I could tell my 28-year-old self that the worst thing that could happen would actually be the beginning of her real life." They sat watching the stars appear over Pasadena. In the distance, they could hear the twins settling into sleep, their lives untouched by the trauma that had shaped their parents' generation. "The foundation got another major donation today," Maggie mentioned. Anonymous, but from a grateful survivor who found her voice. The Sterling Family Foundation now served abuse survivors across 30 states. Amanda's research had become the gold standard for understanding complex trauma from intimate relationships. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Amanda, UN resolution passed unanimously. Family-based financial abuse is now recognized as human trafficking in international law. We did it. Reading the message aloud, Sarah felt deep satisfaction. Eric's crimes had been transformed into protection for countless future victims worldwide. As they prepared for bed, Sarah checked on the twins one more time. Grace curled up with a stuffed elephant gifted by children of other survivors. James slept clutching an astronomy book, already showing scientific curiosity that would guide his future. Looking at her children, Sarah saw infinite possibility unmarked by their father's poison. They would grow up knowing their worth, understanding consent, recognizing manipulation, and believing their voices mattered. The Sterling family legacy of abuse had ended with Eric. The Mitchell family legacy of truth, justice, and healing was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more survivors needing help, more predators to stop, more systems to change. But tonight, Sarah fell asleep surrounded by chosen family, knowing that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most profound triumphs. Eric Sterling had tried to erase her from her own life. Instead, he'd helped her discover who she really was, a survivor, protector, mother, and force for justice that no amount of wealth could ever destroy. The real story, messy, complicated, beautiful, and true, would continue for generations. If this story of justice and survival moved you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you have had the courage to fight back like Sarah did? Share this with someone who needs to hear that survivors can become protectors. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of people who refused to let evil win.